Okay, so let me start the recording. Yes. So
Y-
please.
Uh, yes, sir. So, sir, throughout the process of the project, doing the layout and everything, there has been some iterations, and and there have been a few different layouts that we have tried and different topology also for the same gate. So, sir, we have more than two or three layouts to show. So,
Mhm.
sir, can we do that? So, we if we show the comparison of.
Yeah, but you have to limit your overall presentation within that stipulated time. So see, you already
Yes, sir.
have shown something in the first presentation. Hmm? You need not repeat that. You may just want to share just one or just set the context so that we understand what problem you are solving. And you do not need to repeat the entire first presentation now. So that will give you some more time, like more space in terms of slides also. And the old layouts, you can simply say that, okay, this was the first layout we tried, and we noticed that this had a lot of routing constraints around it. So we went to the second layout. This had this constraints, or this had this challenges, and this is the final layout that we have in the project. So how long did it take? Just 20-30 seconds. So don't worry about presenting more stuff. The thing is, you should still remain within the time limit. And if you present more stuff, then it only demonstrates that you did more work, and that's good, right? And if you present that and you say, why did you want to change that, or why did you improve that, you finally give a synthetic table comparing the two layouts, three layouts. That makes all the sense. Why not? That's the intent of the project, no? The intent of the project is that you should experiment with the tools, you should experiment with the designs, you should experiment with different layout topologies, and come up with the best one. So why not? Please do show.
Okay, sir. So it means that we should have a clear comparison of what we are doing and how. So basically, there should be a
So if you are showing, then it is pertinent that the reason of why you shifted from one to another should be evident. Whether that requires a complete comparison or not, that is not necessary. That is for you to decide. Hmm?
yes, yes,
I know. So,
yes, sir. And one more doubt, sir.
mhm.
Sir, this is a general doubt. This has been an observation from assignment to this project also. In each of the post layout simulations, we were able to see that the leakage power was decreasing. Uh,
Mhm.
so I was trying to think of a reason, but I was not able to arrive at a conclusion.
So did you look at the junction leakage? Like what kind of uh, leakage was reducing? Was it subthreshold leakage? Was it junction leakage? Was it gate leakage? What was it reducing? So from what I think, it would be junction leakage that must have reduced. And that could be because your layout had sharing of source drain regions and therefore lesser junction width than, or lesser junction area than what is there in the models.
Okay, sir. Actually, we have not differentiated in terms of junction and gate during the simulation, so that is why we do not know.
Okay. So
Sir.
that you can check. You can just add, define the current source or voltage source on junction as a different one than the one on the gate, and you will be able to quickly estimate.
Okay.
Anything else?
Sir,
Yes, Devjit.
sir, sir, I have one question regarding the static power. Sir, so the one power is noted while we are simulating in Eldo in the terminal itself. So is that static power? Uh,
So the dot DC power, the dot DC, and then the current value comes. Are you talking about that?
yes, sir. Means whenever we are simulating in Eldo without means writing any commands, also there is one power that is given.
Yeah,
It is
that can be considered as DC power, static power. Yes.
okay, sir. Okay. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Uh, for this purpose, there could be other situations that cannot be considered as static power. Okay, but for the static designs that you have, for the ones which do not have any reference currents and anything like that, that can be considered as a static power. So anything else?
Hello.
Yes, Naman?
Good morning, sir. Sir, I want to ask regarding the power calculation. Can I ask?
Yes.
Sir, in my project, like there is a pulse generator and latch. So basically, what I'm right now, what I'm doing, like I'm calculating total power. Like from the VDD, there is current I1. So I'm calculating with the I1 with respect to reference clock. So is it correct, or I should calculate the separate powers for latch and the pulse generator? Like,
Separate power for latch and pulse generator is not required, but you are expected to give a separate power for clock. Clock power has to be characterized separately. Clock power means the power consumed and clock toggled. And
right
other
now,
power is when data toggled.
okay. Right now, what I'm doing, like I'm calculating the dynamic power, which is total power, kind of, and I'm calculating the capacitance of clock pin. So that basically
No,
in the
capacitance of
standard.
clock pin is anyways required.
Yes, sir.
Capacitance of clock pin is anyways required, but clock power is different. Clock power is when clock toggled, then some latches, and then there are some transitions inside the latch also. That is also included in clock power. It is not clock pin ka power. It is when clock toggled, what was the power consumption.
Means there is a 10, like suppose there is a clock, reference clock. So I'm doing 10%, I'm taking 10% duty cycle. So if there is a 10 clocks, so in the 10 clock there is a only one period of the data. Well, I mean there is a one high and one low in the 10 clock, all the 10 duration clock. So that duration I'm measuring, and then subtracting the leakage, so it will give the dynamic power.
Yeah.
Then
So for one period, you estimate the power consumption,
Yes,
subtract the leakage, and that is your clock power. You do not take it for 10 periods.
okay. And for the separate leakage, I'm doing the I'm putting the input at the DC level, then I'm calculating
Yeah.
the leakage.
That should be fine.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
So I don't need to I don't need to have a separate power for pulse generator and latch, right, sir?
No, you don't need to segregate. If you wish to, suppose you want to actually talk about as a project team, you want to talk about, okay, our pulse generator is also low power, and therefore see the default tha that consumed that kind of power, and over here we are consuming this kind of power. You may want to do it. So this is your presentation. You have to tell me what you have learned. Huh?
Okay.
So you choose. If you want to tell me about it, you tell me. If you don't want to tell me about it, you have not learned anything about it, then don't tell me. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it is your presentation. And okay, in the presentation we will have marks linked to the layout, the quality of the layout. We will have marks linked to quality of verification. So you may want to talk about how did you verify your circuit, or how did you characterize your circuit. You may want to talk about it. You may want to talk about that SS slot is the worst case for me for timing, and this device, when we sized it up, we saw improvement in timings. Whatever you learned. Okay,
Yes,
about all PPA, power performance area, all the three aspects, whatever you learned, you should talk about it. That is what I want to see. Okay.
Okay.
There is no, okay, so I'm already telling you, I want to see the layout. I want to see how you calculated the power. I'm already telling you how you calculated the delays. All that I want to see. But in that can be just one table and done, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got
One
it.
slide you can tell me all this, but you have more time. So that how do you use that time? That is your ingenuity.
Yes, sir.
That is where you tell me what you have learned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Neeraj?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, I have some doubt regarding the PVT conditions. Sir, in some doubt session, I heard that power generally we calculated that typical condition. And sir, yeah, and sir, of course, like I have four delays to calculate, like contamination and propagation delay for rise and fall. For all the four cases, I am getting the different values at different PVTs.
Yes, you will.
Yes, sir. But then, sir, what should I mention in the presentation? Like how I proceed, and finally I have to mention the worst cases, na?
Yeah, you tell that what is the contamination delay and propagation delay at slow lot, and what is the contamination delay and propagation delay at the fastest lot? What's the
So I have
problem?
to mention both.
Just two
Like, so
values,
like contamination delay.
one extra row in the table, na? Neeraj, what's the
Yeah,
big
yeah,
deal?
yes, sir. Sir,
Why are
main
you
problem
worried?
is in power. Like, sir, the power in power, what I have to calculate, like average power or the worst case I have to mention.
So you calculate at TT 1.225. That is the way. That is the PVT at which we estimate power, and you code that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Pranjal.
Sir, so I think according to you, sir, that there is a limit on the time, but not limit on the PPT. If I can increase 2 or 3 slides for better comparison, so it's not a problem, na?
Yeah, yeah. Did anyone give you a count on slides?
Yes, sir. Actually, they are giving the 10 slide maximum.
Oh, that is because in their experience, 10 slides mean if you have
Because,
more
sir,
than 10 slides, you will exceed. No, don't
okay,
worry
okay,
about
okay,
that.
okay.
Time limit is what we are more constrained about. इतने
Yes,
में
sir.
ही आपको बताना है. That is what is the art.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Use 20 slides, make animation, do whatever you want to do. See, if they say 10 is the limit, a clever way to do is use animation.
Yes, sir. Actually, I make 2 or 3 layouts now for in the
Yeah.
process.
So
So I
use
want to show that
animation.
how I arrived at the
Make
best
one
layout.
slide. Okay, let me give you. Make one slide, and by animation, just let the new layouts appear on that slide. The number of slides is also maintained. Why do you worry?
Yes, sir.
So don't time limit is what we are concerned about. And in our experience, more than 10 slides you would usually exceed. So that is where they must have said 10 slides, not more than that. But if you rehearse yourself well and you are able to wind it up within 7 to 8 minutes, that's great. No challenges.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. All the best. Vaishnav.
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, so while placement of the contact, sir, previously you were saying that we are supposed to maintain that contact distance from the PR boundary with respect to the M3 layer. So in non-complex, sir, actually the pins are far apart. So it's becoming hard for us to manage between that point to layer, which point to gap which we maintain between each other. Is that compulsory or?
You tell me, is it compulsory?
I think it's compulsory, sir, but
you have the answer. If you do not do it, then there will be DRC errors in the system, na?
no, sir, I didn't find any kind of DRC. Even if I...
Not now, but when you will abut other cells, then there will be DRC errors.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So you have the answer.
Okay, sir. Sir, and one more thing, sir. So our presentation, should it be given by one person, or can it be we can change between the people as time is very low? So one person.
Entirely up to you guys. We will have individual vivas. So each one of you will present. We will be asked to attend a different viva room and everything. So we will anyways differentiate between all of you through the viva.
Okay,
the presentation, each one of you will get equal marks. Whether you do it through 4 people or just one person presents, that is not a problem. The differentiation will come through the marks of the viva. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Harshit, you want to say something? Harshit, you're unmuted. Do you want to say something? Okay. Neeraj, your hand is raised. Is there anything that you would want to ask? So Harshit, yeah, please type in the chat.
Sorry, I forgot to load it.
Yeah. You can type in the chat window, Harshit, if the mic is not working. So your question is that while it's calculating power, do we need to measure while toggling all the inputs? Usually average power is what we give. So you can toggle 50% of the inputs and not toggle the remaining ones. Okay. Or you can toggle different inputs at different points of time and simply add give toggling power of different inputs and then say that 50% would toggle, so this much of power would be consumed. So you could do it like LEGO, where you calculate all the different components of power, like power of all different toggles separately, and then simply add based on, okay, 5 inputs toggled, so this is the kind of power. 2 inputs toggled, this is the kind of power. Your choice. Okay. Yes, Raga, Viva will be immediately after the presentation. So you will present, and then we will ask each one of you to go to separate rooms where the Viva will be happening. In fact, there will be 2 layers of Viva. One layer will be taken by the TAs, and the second Viva will be taken by me. Okay. So each one of you will present separately, and then all of you will come together to the room that I will be in. That's the flow.
Hello, sir. I'm audible?
Yes, Tarun.
सर, हमें आपको लेआउट प्रेजेंट करना था, क्या हम क्लास के बाद कर सकते हैं?
Yeah, we can see that. Abhi, let's move into the class.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, friends, what are we going to cover today? You already know this.
Some memory.
Yeah, we will be talking about memory design. So this one lecture is kind of a primer to the memory design course that we have running in the next semester. So you can decide if you'd want to know more about memories based on this one lecture also. Like if this kind of excites you or not, you would want to learn more about it or not. So this one lecture will do that. Today we will only talk about SRAMs, and that too very top level view I will be giving you. And in the course, we will also talk about non-volatile memories and other periphery circuits for SRAMs and also for non-volatile memories. But this as a part of DVD course, we will only talk about memory cell primarily and a little bit about sense amplifier today. Okay. So why memories? Like we talked about the entire library, we talked about some arithmetic circuits. Then why memories? What is so important about memories that we're talking about it in DVD course also?
Sir, memories are the minimalistic storage elements which provides high density. So if we consider a case of a register or a latch or a flip-flop, then those involve large number of transistors. Even though they provide the storage functionality, they don't provide high package density. So we need to specifically look into memories.
Thank you, Ranjit. So you already made my task a little easier in the sense that what we are saying is that memories are high density storage elements, and they are so important that today they cover in advanced SoCs they cover up to 70 to 80% of chip area. So come to think of it, all that you've discussed in this course about libraries and everything, that is not even 20% of total chip area. Do you see that? And since memories cover that huge area or have such a huge footprint on a chip, we talk about memories in this course also. And that is also the reason why we have a separate course altogether on memories that will be running in the next semester. So why is it that memories consume so much of area, or why so much of area is given to memories? See, in a typical computer architecture, you will see that memories are there at various levels. There are register files, which could be shift registers, but which could also be small memories. There are caches of different level of hierarchy. First level cache, which is integrated inside the processor. It operates at the same speed as the processor. It has to operate it would possibly access every cycle. And if you've done the course on computer architecture, you also know that there is an instruction cache, there is a data cache, and there could be the concept of a unified cache also. So there are these caches, level 1 cache, level 2 cache, level 3 cache, and all that. So all this is on chip. And then outside the chip also, then you have main memory, which would typically be DRAM. We will cover about DRAM also in the memory design course. And beyond the DRAM, there will be non-volatile storage, the pen drives that you have where you would store your data. So do you realize that memories are kind of pervasive? As we move away from the processor, they're also becoming slower. So while register files operate at the data path speed, are really, really very, very fast, level 1 caches operate at processor speed. The second level caches may actually take multiple processor cycles. Third level cache may take still longer. And as you go to main memory, which is off chip, the time duration or the time of access increases multi-fold. Okay, so it would take hundreds of cycles to access a DRAM from a chip. So how you size these memories and how you organize this architecture is critical. And you look into quite a bit of it, I hope, in detail in the computer architecture course. How many of you have done the CA course? And have you covered these different hierarchy architectures, different hierarchies in memory architecture? So you're raising hands to tell me that you've done the course and you understand this, or you're raising hands to ask questions. So please ask. Ranjit?
No, sir, it was just to indicate.
Okay. Akash? That was also to indicate.
Yes, sir, that was same.
Okay. Just 2 of you have done CA course, others have not done computer architecture course? I'm very surprised. Okay. So the chat window says +1. Okay. I get it. So many of you have done the CA course and you do understand that memory hierarchy is critical to manage, is important to manage. In MDT course, we will spend just about a lecture or 2 on memory hierarchy and how to size this up, because we've already covered it in CA. But we will actually spend more time on how to design the level 1 cache or level 2 cache, or the DRAM, so that you get you achieve the desired objective, whether it is high density or high speed or low power, whatever it is. So Ranjit already mentioned that the standard, the latches and the flip-flops, they take much more area than a standard 60 memory cell. So we will come to just that. But before that, when we talk about memories, we also need to realize that whether it is register files or L1, L2 caches or L3 caches, there are different kinds of memories that come into picture. One set of memories is random access, which are static RAMs and DRAMs. But then on any chip, you would also have stuff like FIFOs. Have you heard about first in, first out FIFOs, which are used to implement queues? You also have last in, first outs, which are used to implement stacks. So when you do programming, you must have definitely, in data structure courses, you must know about stacks. So there are memories which would be used to implement stacks. Then there are shift registers, which you already know. And then there are content addressable memories. Do you know what is a CAM? Have you ever heard about it earlier?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Who has?
Sir, I have.
Okay. Can you tell us about it? What is a CAM?
Yes, sir. So it is a type of associated memory that is used for high-speed searching applications. It basically finds the data and returns the address of matching data.
Great. So see, typically when you talk of a memory, you would typically give an address location and you would want to find out what is written on that particular address. A CAM is something different. CAM does not know what the address is. CAM knows what the content is. So you search for the content and that leads you to the address. And then from that address, you may do further operations. Now, where is it needed? Consider the case of a network router, a network switch. You know that you want to route some packet of data to Google's US office. So you want you know that the destination is US, but in a particular routing switch, all that you can tell is that, okay, out of these 4 switches, which one would take me closer to the US destination, to the US server? So you search for US in the contents, and whatever programming or whatever programming has been done at the router level, it will tell you, oh, go to port number 25. It will route your packet to port number 25. Now you switch the router off, you turn it on again. Next time round, it may route you to port number 29, port number 2, wherever, whatever has been configured. So depending on data, you will get a different address to go to send your packet to. That is what is content addressable memory. This is also very widely, or content addressable memories are tightly coupled to processors, so that when a particular instruction is given, the follow-up instructions are brought in quickly based on the content, by doing a quick content search as to which location is this particular instruction stored, and then I pull out remaining instructions from that region quickly. So CAMs are specific memories, and we will not really talk about them much in the course, but just for the sake of completeness, CAMs are also non-random access read-write memories. Now, while these are read-write memories and these are all volatile, like volatile means that when you switch off the power, the contents will get erased. So when you power up the circuit again, you will need to write inside the memory all over again. But you don't want, or you also need memories which would not erase all the data, is it not? That is where we have NV read-write memories, that is non-volatile read-write memories. These include electrically programmable ROMs, electrically erasable programmable ROMs, and flash memories. So what is the use of these flash and EEPROMs and EEPROMs? Anyone?
Sir, these memories, firstly, they provide the non-volatility, and the second thing is that these can facilitate the a large number of writes, so they can be erased and written.
Yeah. So EEPROMs over here cannot be erased, but EEPROMs can be erased. So EEPROMs are electrically programmable ROMs. So what you do here is you kind of blow away the fuses. Once the fuse is blown, now you cannot rebuild it again. So EEPROMs, where would they be used? Can you think of a use case?
Boot sequence.
Yes, boot sequence. Or, for example, there is a standard set-top box chip, which you also sell to Airtel, and you would sell to Bharti, and you sell to Tata Sky, and you sell to Dish TV and everyone. Now, Dish TV wants to program such that people cannot use their set-top box or their Dish TV, their box with, let's say, Tata Sky. So they will use the EEPROM there to program the memory and prevent access from any other provider to this particular box. EEPROMs would also allow erase. They could be, for example, for boot code, where we say that, okay, it may happen that I want to give a firmware update 1 year down the line, so I should have the flexibility to erase also. So EEPROMs would be used there. And then flash. Flash, all of you know. Where would you use flash? Where would you use flash?
Sir, our memory cards and everything has flash.
Yeah, your cell phone has a flash. Everything, all the solid state storage that we talk about is with flash. So then there are ROMs. ROMs are read-only memories. You cannot write into them. Where do you use a ROM?
Again, sir, booting data and all those.
In a boot sequence. In those parts where you are just stored which address location, for example, you would go to get the first output or stuff like that. So boot sequence would typically be stored in ROMs. This you cannot change. Once it is programmed, you cannot change it.
All the code memory will be of type ROM.
Yes. So this is the wide range of memories that exist. So we will talk about, as I mentioned, SRAMs, we will talk about DRAMs, LIFOs, CFOs, shift registers, and CAMs we will not talk about as much. But we will talk about EPROMs, EEPROMs, flash, and then ROMs when we will do the MDT course there. Okay. Now, when we talk about these different on-chip memories and off-chip memories, so on-chip memories are typically SRAMs. Whether we are talking of L1 cache, L2 cache, L3 cache, when it is on-chip, it is typically SRAMs. They are very fast, but they're not as dense. We talk about 6 transistor SRAMs. You've heard about 60 SRAM cells? 60 SRAM cells? No one?
Yes, sir. So it has 2 transistors to control the bit lines and the 2 back-to-back coupled inverters.
Yeah. So 60 transistor cells. So we are talking about 6 transistors to save 1 bit of data. When we talk about DRAMs, DRAMs are 1 transistor and 1 capacitor. And flash is actually effectively less than 1 transistor per bit of data. On every transistor, you could actually be storing 2 bits or even 3 bits of data. And that is where it is much more dense. Endurance means the number of times you can read-write into that particular memory. So in a SRAM, it is 6 transistors, fully static CMOS logic, regular voltage operation. Endurance is maximum, very high level of endurance. DRAMs, again, very high level of endurance, even though we have a capacitor which could leak a little, but even then the endurance is very high. But flash, we actually, when we will do the course, we will see that in flash we actually use very high voltages, and therefore endurance goes bad. We cannot really do as many number of reads and writes as you can do in a SRAM. So there are various figures of merit, speed, density, endurance, power, refresh. So what does refresh mean? What does refresh mean? Anyone?
Restoring the data that was stored on the cell.
Yes, refresh means that if you do not restore the data on a regular basis, then what happens? If you do not restore the data on a regular basis, you may actually end up losing data. You may actually end up losing information. So you have to refresh. And DRAMs, because they store data on a capacitor, it's a floating capacitor, that can leak. This charge can leak. Therefore, you need to refresh the DRAM, the contents of a DRAM. Okay. Retention, we already talked about. As you switch off, the power would go off and the contents would be erased. And then mechanism is bistable latch or a capacitor, or in a flash with using a mechanism like FN tunneling or hot carrier injection to be able to do read and write operation. Okay. Faisal, you have a question?
So first thing is, when we were talking about flash, you were saying on 1 transistor we will store 2 to 3 bits. So how is that possible? Like a transistor pay
Magic. So we have a floating gate there. We use till now we've just looked at a gate, oxide, and then the substrate.
Yes,
in
sir.
flash, we use special kind of devices where you have gate 1, you have silicon dioxide, you have gate 2, you have silicon dioxide, and then you have the substrate.
Is it like the floating gate or something? No, sorry. FG MOS, floating gate MOS.
Yeah, so you have a floating gate there in which you can trap charges.
Okay. Okay. Yes, sir.
So when you trap charges, the VT would change, and then you will be able to say that what is the
Yes.
kind of data stored there.
Okay. And sir, one more thing, can you please reiterate why do we need to refresh?
Because in DRAMs, you're storing data on a capacitor. It's like a dynamic gate. So why did you need to use a keeper there? Because that data would leak. Some charge sharing can happen, something can happen, some mishap can happen due to which that data can be lost. So you put a keeper in a dynamic gate, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Now for a DRAM, if you start to put keepers in every cell, then you will become a 2T 1C cell. Area would double. We don't want that.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, we say, okay, we will keep 1T and 1C, but every now and then we will refresh the data. We will recharge, we will put the charge on the capacitor again.
Yes, sir. Okay. Understood. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a quick overview of different kinds of memories that we have. But whatever be the kind of memory, you will see that we can still cover them in one course because they are organized in a very standard way. What you have is a structured array of storage elements which are accessed. You know, if let us say we are storing one word in this particular row, then we have a decoder which would select a particular word, and we have IOs which would give out the output. So by putting them in a structured array, we are able to actually make the array much, much denser, and also use lesser periphery circuits or lesser additional circuits than what you would use in a latch. So the structure of all the memories, whether we are calling it DRAM or SRAM or flash, would typically have a core array, would have decoder region, and would have IO region. We'll look into it in a little more detail a little later. But let us look at the benefit of having a structured core array.
I have a doubt, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, always when it comes to the memory structure, will we just have an M-cross structure, sir, or do we have any other structures?
Oh, so there will be many structures. This is the most rudimentary basic structure that I'm introducing you to over here in this class. When we go to memory design course, we will see there are hierarchical architectures, there are other structures also. But still, you know, this basic tenet that there is a cluster of storage elements which are closely coupled, not only through word line, but also through bit lines, that tenet remains constant. Okay. That there is some decoding architecture there, that tenet remains constant. That there are IOs which would have circuits to buffer the output, that tenet remains constant. That there is some brain, some control region somewhere, that tenet remains constant. So since these tenets remain constant, we start with a very basic architecture.
Okay.
We can go into much more complex architectures, and we do go in the course itself. We do go.
Okay. Okay. Sir.
Okay. Yeah. So if we look at this basic architecture only, where we have a control, decoders, array, and IOs, this control region is the brain of the memory. Okay. This would have circuits which would tell whether it is a read operation. So if it is a read operation, it will tell, okay, activate this set of signals. If it is a write operation, it will say activate the other set of signals. If it is a dummy operation, it would say, okay, save power, and all that. So this control region, you may say, is the brain of the memory. It controls the state machine. So in a memory, you could do multiple operations. Say in a latch or in a flop, you would just trigger the clock, and the latch will be written into, and it will also output in the same cycle or whatever will happen. In a memory, by the virtue of consolidating a big array and everything, you separate the read and write operations across cycles. You say, okay, when I want to write, I will use one particular set of inputs. When I want to read, I will use another set of inputs and outputs. Okay, so there are different states that the memory can be in, and that is controlled in this control region. The control region has what we call as a clock generator and what we call as a some address pre-decoding also in it. So when the addresses come, they are pre-decoded, and when the clock comes, an internal clock is generated. These pre-decoded addresses and the internal clock go to what is called as a post decoder. And this is generic. Again, across all memories, you will have this. Now, how many post decoders you have, what is the architecture, that may change, but you will still always have a post decoder. Okay. The post decoder would generate what we call as a word line. It will select a particular row. When a particular row is selected, the memory cells, the storage elements stored in that particular row, will discharge bit lines. Now, in this case, because I'm starting to talk about SRAMs, I'm showing a differential, a pair of bit lines, bit line and bit line bar. But in SRAMs also you have single-ended, just one bit line per memory cell. And then when we talk about ROMs and when we talk about DRAMs and when we talk about flash memories, you would typically have only one bit line per memory cell. Why don't we have 2 bit lines in those ROMs and DRAMs? You've done layouts now. If I have to route 2 metals versus 1 metal, what is denser?
One metal is dense.
One
I
metal.
won't need space.
So you want to keep as dense. We talk about ROMs to be very, very dense, DRAMs to be very, very dense, flash to be very, very dense. So for that purpose, we do not go for differential bit lines there. But when you select a memory cell, some bit line would discharge. And that discharge you will measure, you will estimate, and you will observe at what is called as a sense amplifier. Okay. So once the discharge has happened, you trigger the sense amplifier and you output, you output the differential, or you enhance the differential and you give a 0-1 output on the Q pin. Okay. So this is a typical read operation as it would happen inside a memory. When you talk about a write operation, you will still have word line selection the way we talked about, but you will also have another clock going from here and you will have what you call as a write driver. So data will come from outside and write driver will discharge one of the bit lines, either bit line or bit line bar, and that would be written into the memory cell there. Okay. Any questions here? Okay. So again, this is just to give you an intuitive feel of how different components or how a signal flow, a clock flows inside the memory to accomplish a complete read and write operation. Okay. So this is a D latch. How many transistors can you count in it? Quickly.
14 transistors.
14 transistors. But do you notice that of these 14 transistors, there are a few transistors which are not really needed, or there are a few transistors which could actually be shared across memory cells? For example, consider the case where word line is not selected or where the clock is not coming. So clock is 0 means both these PMOSes are on. Am I right? If these PMOSes are on, then I'm effectively having VDD directly over here. So in a way, these 4 PMOSes are not required 99% of time, because for a memory, the clock would come rarely. So you have 1000 words in a memory. Even if you access memory in every cycle, any particular word will be accessed only 1 in 1000 times. So more than 99% of times, this PMOS is not getting selected. These PMOSs are simply waste. VDD is already coming here. Are you able to see this? Friends, if you don't ask questions, the questions will simply linger on in your minds. Is this clear? Are you able to understand why I said that 99% of times the CK is 0 for a particular memory storage element? Is that part clear?
Yes, sir, that is
No,
clear. Sir,
it
I
is
have a
not
doubt
clear.
that
Sorry, Vaishnav. Yeah.
Yeah, Akash, please.
no. Sir, I just want to know that you said in 99% of the cases we don't need these PMOSs. But sir, as you said, the 1% case, matlab, what will be the alternative way to implement that 1% case?
Yeah. So you tell me, if I do not use a full CMOS circuit, what do? We have already done some such circuits where we were not using full CMOS. So what were the constraints that were coming on our way?
So like we can use a domino logic or something that.
Okay. We do not want to make a DRAM. We want to use static logic only. So what was the static method in which we were not using the PMOS stack or not using the PMOSs, as many PMOSs?
We were using the pseudo
NMOS. And what was the
Yeah.
challenge of designing pseudo NMOS? Sizing. So as soon as I remove these 4 PMOSs, I have a pseudo NMOS circuit then. What this means is that I have to size my devices very carefully. Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir.
So these 4 PMOSs are not required for 99.9% of time. Therefore, you say I remove them. But for that 0.1%, you still don't want to fail. And for that, you have to do the sizing. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So Vaishnav, what did you not understand? You said nahi aaya samajh mein. What was
It
it?
was
that you
me.
could... No,
It was
Faisal,
me.
yes. Yeah.
Sir, 99% वाला concept नहीं, बाकी ये वाला तो clear है कि
So
हाँ,
let us
0.
say there are 1000 words in a memory.
Yes, sir.
In any cycle, you will access 1 word.
Yes, sir.
So the remaining 1000 words or 99 words, they are not
Okay,
being accessed.
99% of okay, मैं clock cycles में confuse हो गया था. ठीक है, अब अभी clear है.
Yeah. So for the 99% of cells, the clock is not coming, na?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay.
In
Understood.
reality, this is 99.99, something more, still higher.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But you can't let that 1% or 0.1% or 0.01% also fail. That
Yes,
is where
sir.
you need to be careful about the sizing. That is where sizing comes into picture.
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you.
Okay. So what we therefore use in SRAMs is this 6 transistor cell. Over here, what has been done is, this inverter is there. This inverter is there. Then this clock transistor has been taken up, and this clock is now called word line. Okay. And this D transistor has been removed and put in a common area, which is called the IO region. Remember, I said there is a write driver where D would come. So this transistor, the D NMOS has been put in the write driver now. So what has happened is that what you are repeating millions of times in a storage memory is not these 14 transistors, but only these 6. And you have a 60 memory cell. So this word line is nothing but the clock. This is the inverter that we talked about, where we said that these PMOSs have been removed. And these bit lines actually represent the internal nodes over here. This node. Such that the data, the NMOSs of the data are in the write driver down below. Are you able to see this? that a 60 memory cell is a minimized latch, nothing else. Any questions? Okay, great. So now how do you read and write into this latch? So to be able to read into this latch, what you do is you first pre-charge the bit lines. So these are bit lines and bit line bars. You pre-charge them and you take word line to be high. When this particular set of NMOSes are turned on because word line went high, what happens? They start to connect bit lines and the internal nodes. This side stores a 0 and this side you pre-charge to VDD. What will happen? Some current flow would happen. As that current flows, bit line would discharge BL bar, because this is also 1 and this is also 1. BL bar would not change. And it is this differential that is created that you will sense at the sense amplifier to complete the read operation. Are you able to see this? Any questions?
Sir, please explain the working again, sir.
Okay. So what are we saying is that even before you select the word line, you pre-charge, you maintain the bit lines at a particular value. So these bit lines are, as we just shared, internal nodes. They are simply capacitors. So you pre-charge them to a particular value. And then when you turn the word line on, the side on which 0 was stored, that particular side, the bit line would discharge. So one of the bit line remains as VDD because on that side 1 was written. The other bit line starts to fall from the 1 level. And you measure the differential generated, and that is how you say, okay, I'm storing a 0 or a 1 inside this memory cell. So if BL discharges, you say it is a 0. If BLB discharges, you say it is a 1, or vice versa. Okay? This is clear now?
Yes, sir. I understood, sir, but why are we exactly discharging this BL, sir? I mean, what's the exact...
Otherwise, how will you make out what is written inside the memory cell?
Oh, yes, sir.
You want to read, na?
Yes, sir. Understood. Yeah.
So this is a read operation. Okay. So now how do we write into the memory cell? Let's say in the same memory cell where 0 was written on the BLTI node. Now, if I want to write a different data, what it means is that BLTI should go to 1 and BLFI should go to 0. Now, what would you do? See, you have this NMOS which would connect bit lines to the internal node. What would you do? You want to write a 0 and you want to write a 1. What would you write on the bit line? Hello?
Sorry, sir. Can you please
Charge of the bit line.
I'm asking you, see, in the read operation, we pre-charged both the bit lines to 1. Then we said, okay, the side which stores a 0, that will discharge the bit line and we will know whether it is a 0 or a 1.
Yes, sir.
Now I want to write inside the memory.
Yes.
And I have those NMOS pass gates.
Yes.
What would I write on the bit line now to be able to do a complete write inside the memory?
Sir, we'll set the bit line. So if you want to write a 1, we'll set the bit line high by the right driver and we'll turn on the word line. So that this will write onto the...
Okay. What about bit line bar?
Yeah, bit line bar will be the complement of bit line, which will be written.
Okay. So in the read cycle, both bit line and bit line bar were written to 1. However,
Yes.
in the write cycle, you will put them at a value which is desired. For example, if you want to write a 1 on particular bit line, on a particular side, you would maintain that bit line to be 1, and the other bit line side, you will put a 0. And then what happens? Look at it. See, NMOS will transfer 0 much more efficiently than a 1. So what happens is, when you take the word line high, after keeping one of the bit lines to 0, the node 1 discharges fast. On the other side, the node 0 will only charge up just a little because it is an NMOS through an NMOS. Once node 1 has completely discharged, that is when, like, you see this PMOS turns on. And that is when the write operation is completed. So initially, there is only some charge that can come from the bit line. It cannot really take 0 to 1. Unless this comes into picture, you will see your write operation cannot complete. You will never be able to go to full VDD unless you have PMOS coming into picture there.
So can we say that writing 1 would take more time than writing 0? Like, as you have just explained.
Very good. Very, very good. This is what it will take, because to be able to write a 1, you first need to write a 0, and then only 1 will be written. Otherwise, 1 cannot even be written. Very good. Any questions about the write operation? Great. So this is how we would do the read and write inside the memory. And then for the memory cells, we have multiple figures of merit. See, just thodi der pehle we looked at the figures of merit for a memory. We looked at speed, power, area, refresh, endurance, so many things. There are many figures of merit linked to bit cell also. For example, cell current. Cell current is a figure of merit that tells how quickly my bit line will discharge during the read operation. So it will control read speed. Bitline leakage is about power and to some extent also about read speed. Cell stability. So what happens? See, when you, so cell current, let's just quickly go through the figures of merit. Cell current is about, as I said, speed, the speed at which the bit lines can discharge. And it is essentially determined by the stack, the sizing of this stack. The bigger the devices, the more current there would be. But realize, the bigger these devices, more is the leakage also. More is the capacitance of the bit line also. So we cannot simply keep on increasing the size. Cell stability is one of the most important specification of any storage element, whether it is a flip-flop or a latch or a memory cell. And the challenge is highest during read operation, because during read operation, you expose your latch, your storage element, to external noise. What happens is that when you start a read operation, current starts to flow like this. When a current flows, see, this was initially storing a 0. But to ensure that a current flows, this value will go from 0 to Vx, a value higher than 0. Otherwise, there would be no current flow. And as this goes to a level higher than Vx, a level higher than 0, it can actually turn on the devices on this side, turn off the PMOS on this side, and so on. Okay, and that is where risk starts to appear. So the cell stability starts to degrade. You wish to ensure that this Vx is as low as possible. Therefore, we get another sizing constraint over here, which is that pass gate has to be much more resistive than the pull down. So this is the pass gate. This is the pull down. The pass gate has to be much more resistive than the pull down. If pull down is more resistive, then what happens? This node will rise above VDD by 2, and it will kind of flip the contents of the memory cell. We don't want that to happen. So there was this question now, if we remove those PMOSs, what happens? So we already start to see that there are sizing constraints that would come. Otherwise, the memory cell operation will start to get hampered. Are you able to see this? Any questions? Okay. So the next figure of merit that we are concerned about is Write margin. Write margin essentially means that, see, what are we trying to do? We said that this bit line would go to 0 and then this internal node will discharge. So can you really discharge a capacitor to 0? See, what is this? A bit line is a RC. This is a wire, so which it would have some R, and the wire also has some capacitance. If I apply a voltage source here or a current source here, how long do you think it will take to discharge this particular capacitance to 0? How long? You realize that it being an RC circuit, it will take a huge amount of time to discharge the capacitor to 0. Are you able to see this? Okay, let us wait until you see this.
Yes, sir. It's first order differential equation. So it takes infinite, practically according to the equation, it takes infinite amount of time to discharge the whole capacitor.
Now, do you have that kind of time when you want to read or write a memory? No, you want to operate your memory at 1 gigahertz. So what happens? You say that, oh, I cannot really discharge my bit line to 0. What is the highest level of bit line at which I will still be able to write into the memory cell? Is it 50 millivolts that I discharge only up to 50 millivolts and I will still be able to write? Or is it 100 millivolts? And you will realize that as you have a better write margin, you can actually operate much faster because you do not really need to go through all those RC delays now. Instead of 6 RC, you can go at 5 RC and still be able to write inside the memory. Are you able to see this? So write margin is also a metric of speed. It is a metric of writability, whether I can actually write into the memory cell at all or not. And in the course, when we look at it, we'll also look at the advanced technologies where write margin is actually negative. What it means is you need to take bit line at a voltage which is lower than 0 to be able to write into the memory cell. And we will talk about negative bit line write assist schemes in the course. Okay. So when you want to write into the memory, you want to say that this improve the write margin, you need to say that this pull-up should not be able to drive or should drive lesser current than what this stack of pass gate and write driver can sync through it. Are you able to see this? That the series of pass gate and write driver has to be stronger than the pull-up. Are you able to see this constraint?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So here, do you realize now that we are talking about size of pass gate, pull down, and in this particular case, we are also brought in the pull up, the PMOS into picture there. And if we know all these three sets of constraints, you will realize that designing the memory cell, even though it is only 6 transistors, is not a simple task. That is why we have numerous people working on optimizing the memory cell for the densest memory or for highest speed memory and so on. Okay. Leakage is a part of power consumption. All off devices in a bit cell leak. On devices also have junction leakage. There is gate leakage also. So to have low leakage, you want to use as small devices as possible so that junction leakage is minimized. Gate leakage is minimized. So you want to use as small devices as is possible to reduce leakage. You can also use long channel devices. So typically in industrial SRAM cell, you will notice that if the minimum channel length allowed by a technology is, let us say, X, then the length that is used inside the memory cell would almost always be more than 10 or 20% more than this X. It will be 1.2x or 1.3x also at times. Okay, so the length of memory cell transistors is always larger than the minimum length, so that you can reduce the leakage there. Okay, and you will find in some papers that people also talk about using thick gate oxides so that you can reduce gate leakage. In how do I put it? When in the high K metal gate technologies, the requirement of thick gate oxide usage has reduced a bit, but even then, even for a high K metal gate stack, if you use a thick gate oxide, you can reduce leakage a bit because of reduced paneling. Okay. Any questions still here? Because now I'm coming to the concept of butterfly curve. Have you heard about a butterfly curve in reference to a latch? What is a butterfly curve? Any idea? Okay. So let us say we just have two inverters over here. You see this switch is open. So we do not have a latch. We just have two inverters. In1, in2, and out2 are the three nodes that we are talking about over here. If we look at the transfer characteristics of the two inverters, what do we see? That as in1 rises, in2 would fall. Then as in2 rises, out2 would fall. Are you with me on this? These are the transfer characteristics of these two inverters. Is that clear? Any questions still here? Okay. So what do? We say hame to memory cell ka, we have to find the stability of a memory cell. In a memory cell, there are these two inverters are connected back to back. So what we do is we close the switch. As soon as we close the switch, now in1 is no longer connected. However, that in1 is replaced by out2. So as out2 rises, in2 falls. The other curve was already between out2 and in2. Now realize that we are talking about, for this circuit, we're talking about two curves that relate out2 and in2. And if I merge them one over the other, what would happen? They would simply come one over another, and what we would have is a butterfly curve. So this latch is characterized by the transfer function of this latch is a butterfly curve. Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir.
So now what is important to realize is how much noise can I put in there? That is what is meant by cell stability, na? That how much noise can I be immune to? The more noise I'm able to handle, the more stable the cell is, more stable the latch is. So now let us go to another level of abstraction. We say that this latch, if I am storing a 0 on one side and 1 on the other, the worst case noise that I need to inject is 0 going towards 1 and 1 being reduced and going towards 0. That is the worst case noise pair that I can inject on this particular latch. Are you with me?
Yes,
is this
sir.
the right assumption? This is the worst case for the latch for noise injection? So now, is it okay if I say that this latch is essentially a long chain of inverters which are storing 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Can I say it like that?
So why?
Where N1 is equal to N3 is equal to N5, they're all connected. So there is this loop. See, I give a small noise here. This noise can get increased over here. Then out2 would increase that noise further. So this small noise has increased and it is now fed back into this inverter.
Okay, so
Now,
noise is amplifying. Is it that?
I'm
So,
sorry.
so noise is amplifying itself.
You can amplify, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, a latch is amplifying action, is it not?
Yeah.
That is how you write into a latch. So latch
Yes,
can
yes.
amplify. Now, ab kya ho raha hai? If I just keep one picture, then I am not able to overlap this big noise and small noise. However, this big noise will actually go to this inverter now and will cause much more havoc, is it not? So just to make my work simple, what I'm trying to do is I'm just opening this latch into a series of inverters. Can I do that? Just for sake of understanding. We know that N1 equal to N3 equal to N5 and all that. We know this. So what happens now? It means that if N1 was given a positive noise, then N3 also is given a positive noise and N5 also is given a positive noise. And same applies for N2, N4 and N6. That will be the worst case. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Now, if we plot the butterfly curve now, see this will be N1, N3, N5, this will be N2, N4, N6 and so on. In this butterfly curve, let me say I injected noise onto N1. So N1 pe, on this axis, I injected a noise here. So when N1 was 0, this particular curve was being followed. Are you with me? So I injected a noise. What happened? N2 became slightly lower than 0. Slightly lower than 1. On N2, I injected the opposite side of noise. So what happened? When N2 went to further lower value, N1 became slightly greater than 0. Now on N3, I inject that noise again. When I inject noise on N3, N2 comes here. So initially it was here, now it has come here. I inject noise on N4. And you will see that there will come a point when they will just move between this. I cannot go any further because N4 bhi yahin pe hai. N4 mein noise dala, so I am just stuck in this loop here. Are you able to see this? So it means that my circuit is safe for this amount of noise. If this amount of noise comes, then I stored 0 on N1. Okay, that 0 will go to this value. And I had stored 1 on N2, that 1 would go to slightly lower than that. But I will still have 0 and 1. Are you able to see this? Any questions?
So the point that where they will converge, like they will start repeating each other, is our noise margin. कितना आप दे सकते हो?
अभी मैं वहां नहीं आया. मैं तो ये बता रहा हूँ. This noise, the circuit is stable.
Okay, okay.
Noise margin will come at.
Yes,
but
yes.
This noise, it is not getting troubled. This noise is safe.
Yes, sir.
This noise is definitely less than the noise margin that we could think of. I have more noise margin than this noise. This much I can say.
Yes, sir.
Now let's increase the amount of noise. Let us say I put in that much of noise. So then in the next cycle, what happens to N2? N2 would put this kind of noise. So N1 has now come here. Now again, I will put noise on this. N2 will come here. Again, I will put, now N4 will come there. In 4 pe, I will now put a noise. So it will go on to this curve. You see, N5 is almost close to VDD by 2 now. But I have to inject noise on N5. As soon as I injected noise on N5, what happened? My N5 was almost, now it was already close to VDD by 2. It has now grown beyond VDD by 2. And my N6 is now almost 0. It was meant to be 1, but it is almost 0. The next noise, and I am fully at 0. I have completely flipped. So for this value of noise, my circuit is not stable. So noise margin is somewhere between the first case and this case. Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir.
So what is that? What is that unique case which we would call as noise margin? So that unique case would appear something like this. Okay, I put some noise there, and here. Now this is the largest square that I can fit into these lobes. If there are two asymmetrical lobes, then the smaller square is the noise margin. Because I have shown you symmetrical lobes, the noise margin on both the sides is same. But you can come across cells where the lobes are asymmetrical. So you may say this is the noise margin. No, this is the noise margin. Because if this was the data that you were storing, only this amount of noise could toggle it into the other side. Are you able to see this? So for memories or for latches, people will talk about butterfly curves. So you should now be able to answer what a butterfly curve is. And when they talk about stability or noise margin, you should be able to tell that the stability can be measured by fitting the largest square in the smaller lobe of the butterfly curve. Is this thing clear? Any questions?
Sir, in the first case, sir, which you are explaining about the minimum noise margin thing, there our circuit was being, it was looping between a small loop above.
Yeah.
So, sir,
So that was clearly less than noise margin.
yes, sir, that was less than noise margin. Sir, but my doubt was that in this, after this, we saw that my graph, due to my noise, my graph was moving forward. Why didn't my graph move forward in the first case, sir?
Because there was not much noise. Go. So you have these slides with you. Just play with them yourself. You will see.
Okay, sir. Okay.
You will see that. See, you will see that you will go from like when your circuit is here, you will come here. This is the noise, which means this is the graph. So over here, it will come here. So you will always loop between these two. Had it gone a little down, then you would have come here. And then you would put that noise, you would come on this side.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Because so the noise margin is the value at which it will just, you know, both the noises are just kind of fitting in. So the side of the largest square that you can put in the smaller lobe, that is the noise margin.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Ranjit?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, initially, while we were discussing the figure of merits, so we had some constraints on the pull up or the pull down that we had in this latch structure. So in that case, sir, if we want to include those figure of merits, then we will have, we of course will have a asymmetrical graph because those will be either high skewed or low skewed gates. So if we are using that, then ultimately we are decreasing the noise margin, no, sir. So cell will now be more sensitive to noise.
Yes.
So
that is the challenge of designing these 6 transistors.
So we'll have to find a balance for all of these.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the set of projects that you will end up doing in the memory design course. Just designing the memory cell, it's not easy. It's a big learning that you will get.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So the largest square that you can put in the smaller lobe of the butterfly curve is what you call as the noise margin. Again, I'm giving you very top level view of it. We will discuss all this in much more detail in the course. Okay. We can even remove this abstraction from this course just now. Now, what is very important to look at is the layout. So you have spent a lot of time working on the layout of the standard cells, where we said that for every structure, you would want to keep a distance of half DRC from the PR boundary. You remember? Just now in the morning, Vaishnav was asking, sir, contact, can I remove that half DRC rule? Just in the morning, Vaishnav was asking. So over there, we're talking about no sharing, nothing. In fact, leaving half DRC from the cell boundary. Memories, I would want to talk about the layout because in memories, you say that you would want to share as much around the cell boundary as possible. Because you have a structured array, you know that your memory cell is abutted with another memory cell only. Not that AOI 221 will be abutted with AOI 121. You know it is another memory cell. Because you are aware of this and because there is a structured array, you actually start to share devices across the cell boundary. So if this blue line is the cell boundary, you see I share. So can you tell me which are the pull downs and where is the pull up and where is the pass gate?
Smallest one in the center is the pull up.
Yeah, the one in the envelope. Envelope would mean that
Yes.
we're talking about PMOS over there. So that is the pull up. So these two are the pull ups. And this connection would then be the connection to VDD. Then this one, the smaller, so it means one of these is pass gate, the other one is pull down. From the SNM constraint, we realized that for cell stability, pass gate has to be more resistive than the pull down. So the top one is pass gate, and over here the bottom one is pass gate, and the other device is pull down. So this connection would be for the bit line. This would be for the bit line bar. And then this connection will be for ground. And then this would be word line connections. Only in memories, you use this kind of a long contact. You made layouts. If you make a rectangular contact, what do you see? You see at once a DRC comes. So Vaishnav was talking about contact to contact spacing and how it is impacting the area. So in a memory, because density is of importance, what we do is instead of putting two contacts, one contact separately on the poly and one contact separately on the active, and then maintaining a DRC between them, we actually kind of merge two contacts and form a long contact. And this long contact is allowed to be used only inside a memory. Why can you do this only inside a memory and not elsewhere? Any ideas? Friends?
Sir, because we are going to drop some vias very we know where all the points are where we are going to drop the via, so some DRCs can be adjusted.
Yeah. See, we know that this is the only configuration in which you are allowing these long contacts. So you can play with the optics. See, why are these DRCs there? When we were discussing early on in the course, we were talking about DRCs and how we have this 193 nanometer light, which is still used to make features which are 28 nanometers wide and all that. Is it not? So we said that, okay, because of this large wavelength of light, putting stuff on mask is very complex. So you can't do it. Therefore, DRCs, constrained DRCs, that poly has to be in one direction only and this and that and whatnot. Now, it means that all those rules are largely because of optics. And if in optics, you can predefine patterns, okay, then you can make the diffraction plate in such a way that you can still make structures well. So by playing with what is called as resolution enhancement techniques, we allow large contacts, long contacts only inside the SRAM cell, because we know that this is going to be available in this array only and nowhere else. And in this array also, there is a pattern, a fixed pattern in which they will be there. So I have a clear diffraction pattern for which I have to optimize my mask making process, and therefore it is only allowed in the memory cell and nowhere else. Okay.
So the contacts that are close and violating DRC, they should be made in different masks, right?
They should be made in different
masks. Means if they are made in same mask, so means if the minimum
so
DRC is not
nowhere outside the memory you are allowed to violate any DRC, Debjit.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you not even think about how to do it. Only inside the memory DRC violations are allowed for the purpose of gaining more density, and this is approved or this is designed by the technology team, not by you. You can only request. They will say if they will do it or not, if it is possible on silicon or not.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you don't even think of violating DRCs, not allowed. Okay, Shubham. Okay, so these long contacts you will see only inside the memory cell. Okay, and then you have these metal layers. You will see these small stubs for connecting these contacts to bit lines, VDD, the word line stubs, and the ground. So you will notice that now when you made this stub for ground, there is a particular VR which is shared across 4 memory cells. See, this contact, this VR, they were shared across 2 memory cells, upar niche. But these VRs and contacts which are coming on the corners are shared across 4 memory cells. So while in standard cells, you would not allow any sharing. In fact, if you were to follow standard cell rules, you will have to have memory cell which is this big. But by allowing the sharing, you've reduced the memory area to this much. Okay. And then this is the word lines. The word lines are running and you have these stubs for ground. Okay. So an array then appears to look like this. So this is a 2x2 array there. And that is how you ensure that SRAMs are much denser than latches and flip-flops and other shift registers that we were talking about earlier in the day. Okay. Any questions here? Okay. So with this layout part also done, we need to talk about sense amplifiers. So whenever you talk about memories, people talk about bit cells, they talk about bit cell stability, they talk about bit cell layout. Those who know memories, they will also talk about the layout. And then they will talk about the sense amplifier. So I'm just giving you a quick 1 or 2 slide glimpse of a sense amplifier. We said there is a memory array. Word line would come, it would select a bit cell, and that bit cell will discharge a bit line, and then I will get to see the output somewhere down there. Now this bit line has a huge capacitance on it. If I want to discharge this particular bit line, there is some, what we said, we had pre-charged this capacitance to VDD. I want to discharge it to at least VDD by 2 to say that I have a 0. So what kind of charge are we talking about? The VDD by 2 kind of charge we're talking about. And depending on the cell current, there is a time. There is a time it will take to discharge the particular bit line. In this particular example that is given, you don't need to even go into detail. We're talking about 7.5 nanoseconds. You want to operate your memories at least 1 gigahertz? You have only 1 nanosecond available with you. So what to do? So you say, oh, I don't want to discharge full VDD. To get to less than 1 nanosecond, I can discharge only to VDD by 8, let us say. Or still lower, VDD by 10, VDD by 12. The lesser I discharge, the faster I can be. So what do? You say, oh, so let us put an amplifier down there, which would amplify a VDD by 12 discharge into a full VDD discharge at the output. That is why a sense amplifier. Is the motivation for using a sense amplifier clear? Any questions around that? So I'm telling it like a story. You can read the book and they will tell you a lot of other details. I'm just telling it to you like a story so that you can get the intuitive feel of it. We'll do all the other details when we do the course. But since we are touching memories in the DVD course, you should know at least these few 5 things about memories. So we need sense amplifiers to get the speed. A sense amplifier is typically a latch again. And if you notice, this appears to be the same structure as a memory cell, except that there is an enable gate there. Okay. So what happens is you discharge the bit line and that discharge starts to appear on the internal nodes of the sense amplifier. When you have the sufficient discharge for this latch to operate, you turn this enable signal on. So till that time, this was not a latch because the enable was off. There was no ground supply coming there. But when the sufficient differential is made available, you turn enable signal on. As soon as you turn the enable signal on, what happens? This works as a latch. This small differential gets amplified and you are able to, so the small differential between the two is amplified and you're able to take one of the nodes to 0 and the other back to 1. Okay. And what is important is that when you turn this on, you see that these PMOSes will automatically turn off. So when you do this, when you discharge one node to 0 and recharge the other node to full VDD, you are only talking about this capacitance now, not about the entire bit line capacitance. So in a way, this full swing, you have limited only to a small capacitance. So sense amplifiers also help to save power. So we started to use sense amplifiers to gain speed, but it is very important to realize that sense amplifiers or less discharge on bit lines also helps to save power. So sense amplifiers are therefore very important circuits to be used and understood when you design memories. So in the memory design course, there will be a project or two on sense amplifiers also. So with that, I think, so there are other things which we've already done, row decoders. So decoding, we've already taken, when we were doing logical effort and everything. I'm not sure you realize, but we already took a decoding example only. So decoding, we have kind of already taken care of. And sense amplifiers is the part of IO that we have taken care of. So in this session, I've kind of introduced you sporadically to the most important components of a memory. Any questions?
Sir, what is the minimum amount of time for which we need to wait till this bit line appears at the sense amplifier input, and then we turn on the sense enable signal?
Yeah. So just like any other amplifier, Ranjit, a sense amplifier also has a minimum offset requirement to be able to distinguish 0 and 1 correctly.
Yes, sir.
So that offset is characterized. We will do that in the memory design course. That offset is characterized, and then it is ensured that the offset that appears on the bit lines or the differential that appears on the bit lines is more than that offset.
Okay.
Okay. So there is something called as replica path inside the memory. We'll talk about it in the MDT course, which is used to do this tuning.
Okay, sir.
Okay. But yeah, this is characteristic of the sense amplifier. So if you end up taking a project on sense amplifier, like a few of your colleagues have actually taken a project on sense amplifier in DVD course also. If you attend the presentations, you are all expected to attend the presentation on Friday and Saturday. So when you will attend the presentations, you will get to see the constraints and the details about it.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
Yes, Vaishnav.
sir, I have a basic question, sir. So, am I allowed to run my poly in a horizontal direction, sir? Actually, previously when we were talking about this in one of the class, I remember that you said we will not be using poly in horizontal, but I can't exactly remember what was the reason for that.
Okay. What can you imagine to be the reason for that?
Sir, actually, I got this doubt because we were in a 60 SRAM layout, polys were horizontal, sir.
So I can rotate them and now will be so. What is important is there should be one direction.
Yes.
You can rotate the layout and it will be all vertical then.
Okay, sir.
Nahin?
Sir, exact reason, sir, was that crosstalk reason for that?
No. Diffraction, optics. Resolution enhancement techniques do not allow poly to be run in two directions. Otherwise, the mask will not be generated in the right way.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so it was lithography. Yes, Akash.
So one more reason can be this also, ki if we use one poly in vertical and one horizontal, then the metal layers that we use to connect them, there will be some vertical metal layers that will waste our area.
Yeah, but no, that is not the reason. The reason essentially is that optics doesn't allow that. Poly के ऊपर आपको हर तरफ थोड़ा ना metal लगाना है. Metal you only need to take near a contact. So you'll have to put a contact on poly and then only that contact needs to be tapped by a metal. Is it not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So whether poly is horizontal or vertical doesn't matter. You're only looking at a point on the poly then.
Okay, sir.
So, but the reason essentially is optics, lithography. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Anything else?
Sir, can we present our layout?
Yeah, let me just close the class. Let me stop the recording, then we can do that. So, great guys. This is the end of, so to say, course content. The next session, we will be sitting together and kind of reviewing the entire course. We will go through some brain scratching puzzles, which you would be asked to solve regarding these circuits and why those circuits can fail and everything. So the next session, I mean, when we will do this will be on next Tuesday. That's the Friday timetable. Okay. On this Friday, we have our first set of presentations, project presentations, and on Saturday, we have the second set of project presentations. You have 12 minutes per presentation, which includes Viva time. So you have to finish your presentation within 7, at most 8 minutes, not beyond that. Okay. Otherwise, Viva ke liye kam time bachega, so you will lose. You see, because I have less time to conduct the Viva, I will be able to give only lesser marks, not much. So please maintain the time limits. Do not exceed the time limit. Slides I'm not really bothered about, but the time limit is what is very important to me. And how to make your presentation, again, the guideline is you are telling us what all you have done, what all you have learned in this project. Highlight that. Okay. Obviously, I'm interested in power, I'm interested in performance, and I'm interested in area. I'm interested to see all these aspects. But finally, what I'm most interested in is what have you learned? Okay. All the best. All the best for your presentations, and see you on Friday. I will stop the record. Yeah. Is there? Yeah, Devjit.
Sir, I had a small question regarding measurement of leakage current in dynamic gates. So should we measure the leakage current in the evaluate phase only, right? Just extending the evaluate phase a bit and means where the output is stable.
No, leakage will also be there in the pre-charge phase, Devjit. So you can put two values of leakage there. Reset phase and evaluate phase. There could be two different.
But I was thinking in this way, suppose the output is pre-charged and some set of inputs come that does not discharge the output. Means output is held constant at a floating value.
You're right, Devjit, but there are still two leakage values. If the activity rate is very, very low,
yes,
then you will realize that activity rate means that the clock high period is for very short duration of time. Then you will realize that the reset phase leakage is also very important.
Okay.
So you may want to measure reset phase leakage also.
Okay. And in both the case, we need to take care so that there is minimum amount of stacking effect, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Sir,
Okay.
can we quote the average value of both?
No.
And in the
No average value here.
separate value should be
Two different rows. Yes. Okay. Gagandeep?
Okay. Yes.
Sir, I want to ask about measurement of propagation and contamination in non-complex circuit.
Mhm.
Sir, there we have stages. So in that, sir, as we see that for propagation, I can think that if I am able to involve most of the stacks of transistors, then I can get the propagation delay. But sir, this is not always possible to involve all the stacks that are present in the series. So, sir, propagation, we can kind of go through the simulations and then also analyze. So there could be a mixture of theoretical as well as practical
Yeah,
analysis.
that is fine. That is
Okay.
fine. Madhur?
So I wanted to ask about calculation of dynamic power. So while calculating dynamic power, do we also what we are doing is that we are integrating the time for integrating the current for the transition. So so whenever there is a transition from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0, we are starting from the time point at which the transition exactly starts to happen till the time when the output reaches the 90 or 95% of its settling value. So at that time, the most of the dynamic current will be flowing. So do we also have to subtract some leakage current from that, or that's the only current that needs to be integrated?
Yeah, see, leakage is continuously there. If you want to estimate only the dynamic power, you should subtract the leakage. But it's so that is the most accurate way. Okay. So what you do is you can then, if you do it like that, then you can actually take a much bigger window, Madhur. You don't need to really identify, oh, this is where my transition starts and this is where it ends. That will take a lot of time to have to measure the leakage. You will be wasting easy wave licenses like crazy.
So it doesn't take
Instead,
much.
you just write a measure command. Okay, I want to measure the charge consumed from 1 nanosecond to 2 nanosecond, and then I reduce the leakage from that, the entire 1 nanosecond duration. That's it. Whenever the transitions happen, they will be taken care of.
So the flaw in that is that my transition period is not always fixed for every kind of a transition. For some transition, it may take a little bit longer.
You can change that. You can change that by making a stimuli which is symmetric. No?
So we have tried using both the kind of ways. So, but one issue was that, sir, like theoretically leakages we should consider only when the transistors are off. But we are like in easier way, we see that like all the time leakage is present.
Leakage is always there, na? Junction leakage will always be there even for on transistors, nahi? We just talked about
Yes,
it.
sir. Yes, sir. So, but like by characterizing, actually, I was thinking like when there were like 2-3 orders of magnitude difference. So, like still for proper need, we need to like subtract that because that would be really negligible kind of.
Typically, in good .lib files, you will give data dependent leakage. That is, if the inputs are 0, 0, 1, there is one level of leakage that is given. Input is 0, 1, 0, there is a different leakage that is given, and so on. See, we saw that table when we were talking about stack effect. You remember?
Yes, yes.
And we saw that the order of leakage is so different, just input based. You saw that for an AND gate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, in a typically good design, you would give the entire table there.
So we can also like
that is there in the .lib.
And so to summarize in a single value, we can do an average of all the combination of the possible values, right?
Yeah, that is a poor substitute to put in the data sheet. Yes.
Okay, so but best way to be put everything like different kind of combinations.
A .lib has to be very accurate. So in .lib you will put everything there.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Data sheet you can average it out. Yeah, fine.
Okay.
So even for dynamic power, like for different transitions, we have rising dynamic power for rising, then falling, and for different transitions.
Dynamic, as I was mentioning, you could design it like a Lego. These many signals transitioning, okay, this much power. One more signal transitioning, this much more power.
Okay, so actually the thing was that you're saying that I have to look at easy wave, but we found a command in Eldo, so because of that we are just, it returns the time at which 90% of VDD is returned, so we do not really have to do everything manually. It's
So मैं तो कह रहा हूँ वो भी, you know, you don't need to do those iterative measurements. Now, so you will get the time, then in the next iteration you will measure the leakage. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
You don't need to do all that. पहला fixed window कर दो and then subtract the leakage. Whichever way you feel like, it's okay. This course we can feel free.
So I'm just concerned about the accuracy. Which of the two is more accurate?
The more accurate one would be where you do it across an entire window and then remove the leakage. Because there would be some current which can flow even after 90%.
Yes, sir. We can change it to 99% also.
Yeah, but वो फायदा नहीं है ना, go end to end ना.
Okay, sir.
Like then it becomes your protocol would be different from say Pranjal's protocol or Vaishnav's protocol. So then we can't really use a library then.
Yes, sir. So, but then even for comparing across different projects, the window has to be constant. That's the case.
Okay. That is why I'm saying we cannot do it in such a disparate setting. So do whatever you do, just explain in the presentation.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Ranjit.
Sir, I have a question with regards to the dynamic power and the static power. Sir, in one of our measurements for the slow lot, we found that the static power is larger than the dynamic power. Sir, would that be logically correct, sir?
This is slightly strange. You might have just check if there is some floating node somewhere or some node which is not at ground or VDD, something like that. This would typically not be the case.
Yes, sir.
This would typically not be the case. Leakage that high, either you're using all LVTs and almost no transitions during the dynamic power, but ऐसा होना नहीं चाहिए usually.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So Shadman is saying that they want to confirm something related to project at the end of the session. So I will stop the recording and Shadman, you want to say, please say, even the recording would
it's
be
related to our project that we are doing. So Saranita would want to present something. We just wanted to confirm some of the things. So if the students are done, then
okay. So this is
I mean,
not
they
the
don't
class.
need to leave it, but
Okay. Wait. So let me start.